Hello everyone, and welcome to Storytime with Gig.
Storytime with Gig.
So I just wanted to sit and tell a story about how I became Derby on Mr. Young. I know a lot of people who watch me on YouTube are fans of Mr. Young and like me as Derby. So I thought I'd share with you guys how I became Derby and the whole process of what went into the making of Derby and Mr. Young. I auditioned for Mr. Young over 6 years ago, and I think that's just insane. Now sitting here in the end of 2016 thinking over 6 years ago, I was 14 and I got to audition for this awesome role that pretty much changed my life. I gained so many skills on Mr. Young and I got to do so many cool things. The first audition that I ever had for Mr. Young was something called a pre-screen. What they do is they give you a couple scenes and they call you in, and I just read for a character. They didn't record me, I just was in the office of the casting director, and I actually had 2 scenes, and when I got there we only did 1. I thought I did a really bad job. I remember stumbling on lines and feeling pretty nervous about it. I think at that point I wasn't even fully aware that it was a sitcom. I was just doing an audition like I'm used to, and this casting director that I auditioned for, a very nice man, and I had been auditioning for him for years at that point, and I think he knew that I would be right for the show, so he brought me in again for another audition after that, which began the whole process. And when I went in for that first pre-screen, I actually auditioned for the role of Adam Young, which is kind of funny. Probably 90% of my auditions for Mr. Young were actually for the role of Adam. And starting out as Adam was very interesting because when they did bring me in for Derby later, I hadn't even thought of auditioning for the best friend. After the pre-screen, they brought me in for another one as Adam Young, and then they brought me in for a callback, and then they brought me in for another callback, and I got to be in the top 10 for Adam Young, which is pretty crazy to think about because now that I think back, I think, oh, I would have been a terrible Adam Young. I'm so glad I ended up being Derby. That whole process of the first 4 or 5 auditions was probably about a month and a half. And then they said, okay, we have our top 10 for Adam Young. Let's take you out of the top 10. We don't think you're our Adam Young. Let's bring you in for the best friend. And I thought, oh, the best friend. I hadn't really even thought of this before. I got the sides for Derby, but at the time was not called Derby. His name was Brady, and I'll tell you a little bit later why they changed the name to Derby. So I go in for an audition and I think, okay, this is good. And it felt really good to audition for Brady or Derby. It felt much better because when I got to audition for Derby, he was much more physical and much more big, and I really enjoyed that aspect. The physical comedy was something that really clicked with me. That was really fun to feel that difference between characters. And then they said, okay, we like you so far for Derby or Brady. I think I did one more callback for Brady, and then they told me that I'm gonna do a chemistry read. And so a chemistry read is when they take their top choices at the time for a role and they bring them in together and they watch them do the scene together to see how the actors have chemistry and how they do together. And so I heard that I was going to be doing a chemistry read with Brendan. I had known Brendan at that point for I think over 4 years. I actually knew Brendan from having the same agency as him, and we met for a Christmas party for our agency. I had been going to Vancouver pretty regularly for auditions from Vancouver Island, and it was pretty crazy to think that I got to audition for a show that was gonna be on YTV because I watched YTV growing up. I felt like I was just some kid from a smallish town on Vancouver Island. To get to Vancouver for an audition, it was like an hour drive to the ferry and then an hour and 45 minutes on the ferry and then another 40 minutes to my audition. That was part of my commitment for being an actor. I would wake up early and get on the ferry and I'd go to my audition and I'd go back home. And so this whole idea of going over to audition for this big show that was actually at the time a Canada-wide search. And so I thought that was huge. This is such a great experience, but who knows if I'll get very far with it, right? So I met Brendan at that Christmas party for our agency. And so when I heard that we were doing a chemistry read together, I thought, great, I already know him. And we set up a meeting to talk about this chemistry read just so we'd be sort of more prepared for the idea of going in the room together. And we went and read over the scenes a couple times. And it was fun because we already knew each other, so we already had a little bit of a connection, and I think that helped a lot for our characters' relationships. So then I think it was like a week later, we went into the room and it was just a blast. It was so much fun because Brendan did such a good job at capturing the character of Adam Young. I think I did 1 or 2 auditions with Brendan, and I just remember them being so much fun. I remember being in the room doing our scenes and there being a producer and then 2 writers in the back of the room room and everyone just laughed at the jokes, and it just went really smoothly. And then I think it was a month later that everything was sorted out. I had gotten a call that I had gotten the role, and then we went to the set for our very first day, which was mostly just costume fittings and figuring out what our character's hair and makeup will be. I remember that first day on set, the producers came up to me and said, "Oh, your name is not Brady anymore, it's Derby." And my first reaction was that I didn't really like the name Derby, that I thought it didn't really suit the character. I thought, oh, that's much different than Brady. The reason why they changed the name was because another Disney show had a main character with the name Brady that was just coming out, and that show was Pair of Kings, I believe. They didn't actually tell me, but I saw Pair of Kings and they had a main character named Brady, and it came out just before Mr. Young. I sort of put that together. But then I started to think about Derby, and they told me more about the character and what we would be getting up to with the character in episodes. It started to grow in me, and I actually now prefer the name Derby to Brady. So after the change of the name from Brady to Derby, first week on set, I obviously had my expectations of what it was going to be like, and it was nothing like it. We get everything sorted out. They cut my hair dramatically because I used to have sort of like what in 2010 was a Justin Bieber style haircut, and I always did the hair flip and stuff like that. They cut my hair pretty short and they curled it, which is what they did every day before shooting. We would curl my hair. That sort of dramatic change into a very different hairstyle, what I was used to, helped me feel like the character. And then we started shooting our first episode. The cool thing about this first episode that we did was right off the bat, we had a live audience. I remember that being a sort of like a magical experience, my first time doing sitcom with 4 cameras and a live audience, everyone laughing, and it just felt like such a big experience, and it was so cool. We had some guests come and visit us on set. So the people who made Mr. Young, Dan Signer and Howard Nemitz, they both worked on some pretty big Disney shows, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody and Sweet Life on Deck. So we had both Dylan and Cole Sprouse came and visited us on set, as well as Debbie Ryan and Matthew Timmons. And so that was really cool to have people who I was fans of. I grew up watching Sweet Life of Zack and Cody come and visit us at the beginning of our journey. It was so much fun to have these people around while we were starting our own show. Yeah, I don't really know how to sort of sum up this story. It makes me so happy to know that all the hard work I put into Mr. Young has actually affected people so positively. Yeah, I don't know how to sum this up. I played Derby for 80 episodes of a sitcom that I still think about every day and made me who I am. Yeah, but I had fun telling you guys this story. I hope you enjoyed it, and I know there's probably details I've left out or even ones that I've remembered wrong, but whatever. I told you this story about my adventure with Mr. Young and becoming Brady and then becoming Derby. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that story of how I got my role in Mr. Young. That's pretty crazy, the world of an actor. You know, I started out as a kid on Vancouver Island. Honestly, I think Mr. Young was actually a really lucky break. Like, I worked really hard, and obviously I think, you know, I deserved it a little bit, but any actor who books anything knows that they're really lucky. If you have any questions about the story, about Mr. Young, about whatever, comment on this video and ask away. If you have any requests of other stories of my life that you would like to know, go ahead and ask. I really enjoyed making this video. It was so much fun just sitting here and talking my head off, and I know I didn't make too many jokes, but hey, Mr. Young was such a serious business. Just kidding. Yeah, that was a joke. That was pretty bad. Ha! Thank you so much for watching today, and yeah, you were awesome. Keep being you. I'll see you next time.